Button. All right, my friends, we find ourselves on Mem Aleph Amud Beis on 41b, and we're up to the Mishnah. It shouldn't be too hard to find the Mishnah right here, about a quarter way down from the top of the Amud. And we are getting back to our featured presentation. Last week, we spent a lot of time talking about the Karban Omer. Now we are going to be talking again about more familiar territory, about taking the lulav on the first day of Sukkot when it coincides with Shabbos. Yontif Harishon Shochan Shechalios b'Shabbos. Let's say the first day of Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos. Kol ha'am molichin es luluvein lebeis hakneses. Everyone brings their lulavim, and when we say lulav, we mean like colloquially the way we say lulav. We mean the dalaminim. We bring it to shul before Shabbos begins. Lamacharas mashkimin ubayin kol echad ubayin. Afterwards, everyone comes kol echad ve'echad. Makir shalom. Everyone recognizes that which is theirs. Venotlo. And then they take their lulav. So, I don't know, either you put it somewhere, or of course, you spend 10 hours analyzing your esrog, so you know which esrog is yours. Now, why is it important? You might think, okay, as long as everyone agrees to bring dalaminim over, who cares which dalaminim you take? Well, this is important on the first day of Yantif. In Adam Yotze de Chavasa b'Yantif Harishon b'Lulav Shechavero, that you're not Yotze on the first day of Sukkot with someone else's lulav. You have to own your own lulav, and the Gemara will explain where we get that from.
Aren't we
But
talking about Shabbos right now?
yes, and I'm sure you're going to be asking, wait a minute, I thought
Yeah,
we could take the
yeah,
lulav on
wait,
Shabbos.
yeah, of course.
Very good. The Gemara later will address this, but to satisfy your curiosity, this is going to be a difference between Beis HaMikdash times versus post Beis HaMikdash. So you are correct to point that out, that nowadays we don't do that. I still remember when I think I was a teenager, and it was Yontif coinciding with Shabbos. And like I realized I was like late to shul, and like I run out, I quickly grab my lulav and esrog, and I'm running down the street. I'm like, why is no one else bringing their arbamin with them? And I was like, oh no, it's Shabbos.
Is,
So I was like, what
isn't
do
it
I do?
muktzah?
I don't even
Isn't it
remember what. I think I ran home, and I was just like, no one look, no one look. So it's
isn't it
yeah, that was pretty embarrassing.
isn't it
Um,
muktzah on Shabbos?
yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I think it would probably be muksa. Probably would it be machmas kasar and kiss? I'm not sure, but I think it would be muksa on Shabbos. It's already hooks mitzvah. Okay, so but ushari mosachag, but for the rest of the days of the yantiv, other than yotzei dechavas b'lo v'shechavero, you can be yotzei with someone else's arba minim that you're borrowing over the rest of yantiv. This is unique to the first day. Rabbi Yossi Omer, here's an interesting halacha that emerges from here. Yom Tov Harisha Shechag Shechalios b'Shabbos. Again, first day of Yantiv falls out on Shabbos. B'Shachach, right? Like my case, you forgot, but here you are allowed to. Well, you're really supposed to drop it off earlier, right? So you're allowed to take the dalminim, but you're not supposed to carry it outside. So let's say he forgot. V'hotzi suv l'Reshus harabim. Not only that, but he brought it into Reshus harabim. So that means an Erev is not going to help you when it's a Reshus harabim. If it's a Reshus harabim midoraisa, a biblical public domain, there's nothing you can do. You can't carry Dalit Amos in there. But let's say he did accidentally, he absentmindedly carried there. Putter mipnei shotzio b'reshus. He is putter because he took it out with reshus. Generally, when we say reshus, we mean reshus like permission. What do we mean over here? So Rashi helps us out. Rashi says, Dibur maschel shotzio b'reshus, b'reshus mitzvah, with the permission of a mitzvah. Shayatar b'mitzvah, he was preoccupied with the performance of a mitzvah. Mechashe v'asaku mahir la sosa, and all he's thinking about is how he can run and quickly perform the mitzvah.
Hmm.
Mitokach tov shachashu Shabbos, and in his zeal to take the daled minim, he forgot it was Shabbos. Ukasav Rabbi Yossi, and this is an interesting shita. Rabbi Yossi holds ta b'dvar mitzvah v'shagag b'davar kares pater mikarbon. That if you are trying to perform a mitzvah and you accidentally, inadvertently, were over an isser, that if you did it deliberately, it would carry kares. If you did it accidentally and absentmindedly, like in our case, you absentmindedly took the lulav out, you'd actually be putter from bringing a carbon. Generally, you'd be chayiv to bring a carbon in a case of a shogeg, where you inadvertently violate the sin. But here, you will be putter since you were really doing it to perform a mitzvah. All right. That brings us to the end of the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara asks, Mina hani mili, where do I get this idea? Now, what idea? So Rashi helps us out again. Where do we get this idea that I need to own the Arba Minim? Why is it not sufficient for me simply to borrow the Dalad Minim? So the Gemara explains, the Tanur Abanan. So we are learning, this actually gets quoted later on. So the word in the pasuk ulekachdem tells me that everyone's required to take daled minim. And then the word lachem teaches me lachem mishalachem. For you means from your own property. Lahotius hashalvas agazol. This is the exclusion of a borrowed lulav or a stolen lulav. So it's not sufficient to borrow it. Mikana ruchachavim inad biyotzi yidichavasa biyanta farisha shachag lulav shachavero elam kinasulo b'matana. Rather, the only way to be yotze is if your friend doesn't simply lend you his lulav, but he will give it to you as a gift. Now, wait a minute. What happens? Tosas actually talks about this a little bit. The case that came up in the Gemara. The issue is that if you right, matnas beis charon. So we're not going to go into that whole Tosas on the side, but matnas beis charon is basically the test case. What happened was, if I'm remembering the details correctly, is that somebody wanted to have his father come to his wedding, but he had taken a neder that he wouldn't benefit from him and give him benefit. So what he did was he wanted to do a harama, a workaround. He said, I will give my possessions, I'll give the all the things, all the food that's going to go to the Suda, I'm going to give it to a third party, to my friend, and that way it won't be an issue of my father benefiting from my food. But the issue is, some friend this was, he turns around and he says, well, if I'm really the owner of all this now, I guess I could consecrate it. And he decides to be magdish and consecrate it, which is a real prank and a real jerk move on his part. But then the issue is, he says, what do you mean? I only gave it to you so that my father could come to the wedding. But then is that really called a matana? Because if it's a true matana, a true gift, I truly mean it, then the recipient should be able to do whatever he wants as the full owner. And if he's not able to do whatever he wants, maybe there's something lacking in his ownership over it. So what do we devise to circumvent this issue? So we're going to see in the Gemara momentarily the concept of a matana manasa hachsir, in which Reuven gives to Shimon a full gift, but with the stipulation, as long as he returns it later on, then the gift is chal, which functionally, for all intents and purposes, acts as a loan, but as a benefit that for a short amount of time, you are considered the full owner of it. Okay, so let's see that in the Gemara. Story time in the Gemara, though don't get too excited. It's not particularly agadic, but I was told in public speaking, when you say I have a story, that's when everyone perks up. It's like the opposite when you say I have a great gematria. That's when everyone's like. So no gematrias here today. Right? So those who are there between Mincha. If you remember, I talked about the cruise, that the scholar residence cruise for Pesach, that all the rabbis, or Sukkot in this case, all the rabbis were going on. Shahayu bayim b'sfina, they were on that boat. V'lahaya lulav el Rabbi Gamliel bilvan shalachu be'elav zuz, and the only rabbi. You think about it, it's like these are like the great Tanaim. Okay, they weren't going on a cruise. They were presumably going for travel. Cruises are a recent invention. But the only one who had daled minim was Rabbi Gamliel, that he purchased for 1,000 zuz, which I don't know exactly how that converts, but it's a lot of money. Not Rabbi Gamliel v'yatzabo. So basically, Rabbi Gamliel, he takes the daled minim, he shakes it around, done. But not the Rabbi Yeshua matana. He gives it as a gift to Rabbi Yeshua. Now the Rabbi Yeshua v'yatzabo. Rabbi Yeshua does what he needs to do. He's yotze. V'naseh Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah b'matana. Then he passed on to the next rabbi as a gift. Another Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'yatzebo. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah does the same thing. V'nasu b'matana l'Rabbi Akiva. And then he gives it as a gift to Rabbi Akiva. Not l'Rabbi Akiva v'yatzebo v'Sir Rabbi Gamliel. Right? This whole Chagadia, only it comes full circle. And then Rabbi Akiva, once he's done, he gives it back to Rabbi Gamliel. Now, okay, that was a very nice. I told you it wasn't the most captivating story to ever happen, but from halachic perspective, it is. No, lama li lameimar hachziru milsa agav orche. Why does it need to tell me that Rabbi Akiva returned the Dalamin and back to Rabbi Gamliel? Don't I know that Rabbi Akiva is an upstanding, ethical man of integrity? Of course, he would return it back to Rabbi Gamliel if it's his. So what's it coming to teach me? Kamash Malan. The matana manasa hachsir shmei matana. It's to teach us that a gift given with the stipulation that it must be returned for the gift to have taken effect, for it to be considered a gift, so
Not a
that
gift.
actually works because we see that Tanakh
Oh,
did that. Yihad Amar Rava, as Rava taught, halacha esrog zeh amanasha zirli. So here is an esrog on condition you return to me, not leviyatzabo. So he goes and takes his yotze with it. Hechziru yatza, lo hechziru lo yatza. So if he returns it, he was yotze. If he doesn't return the esrog at the end of the day, he wasn't yotze because retroactively lemafreya, the esrog was never given to him as matana if he didn't fulfill his condition, his end of the deal, to return it after whatever the amount of time was stipulated.
but Rabbi, it doesn't sound like a real gift. If a gift is something you don't have to return.
That's the whole beauty of a matana manasa hachzir. You get the benefit of being the full owner for a certain amount of time to be yotzei the mitzvah, and then you return it. That's the whole.
That sounds like
That's
sounds
the
like a
shtick.
mashkon. Sounds like a mashko, not a gift.
Um, I see what you're saying about Masha. I'm not sure if that's how I would put it, but that's the whole shtick.
That,
That's the
that's
whole
more
shtick.
of that's more of a custodial
What was that?
arrangement. That's more of a custodial
Well,
arrangement.
Yeah,
almost
I think
sounds
what
like
Nat's
it.
saying, like I think you're thinking of Mashkin because Mashkin also generally is for a fixed amount of time with the loan, but
Yeah, and so it's
this is a
sort of a
gift.
guarantee. Yeah, actually, this sounds like to something parallel we're covering in Daf Yomi now in Baba Basra, except the scenario there is where person is a shkivara.
So he's dying.
So he's
Uh,
bequeathing, and then something happened. He miraculously recovers.
Yes, yes, all right.
Or
It's not referring to a matna shchiv meira, and but the thing is,
yeah.
if someone expects to die, sorry, this comes with the sugya of umdana demuchach. The question is, if someone expects to die and he gives away his possessions to someone else, and then he miraculously heals, do we say that he only gave it away because he thought he was going to die? But it was implicit that if he was going to live, he wouldn't want to relinquish all of his possessions. Is that the discussion, Nat?
yeah, pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, it's a very important sugya because it has broader implications for a concept called umdan demuchach. Generally, in halacha, we have concepts like shtika koda that we can only look at what you say. We can't look into your mind. But the whole idea of that sugya there about umdan demuchach is that sometimes some things are so obvious to us, even though they're not explicated verbally, the circumstances dictate that, of course, someone who thinks they're going to die are only relinquishing their property because they think they're going to die. But if they don't, obviously they want to keep they don't want to, live only to be completely bankrupt. So, right, that's the discussion over there. Excellent. Last piece of this Gemara. Lamali lamemar shalach belavzos. Now, again, you'll notice that while the story gives us some details, it's not like a novel. It's not like saying, and they were bobbing on the blue sea and they could smell the court. Right? It doesn't give us extraneous details. So why do we care to know how much the lulav was purchased for? Lahodiacha kama mitzvahs chavivas alehan. It's to teach us how precious the mitzvahs are that he was willing to spend 1,000 zuz. So, right, we make fun of people who, why do you pay $70 or $80 for your Arba Minim? Well, again, this is on the assumption that you can actually tell a difference between a $70 and $80 set, which isn't always so obvious. But assuming there is, this is the source for the idea of investing more in mitzvahs. Very good. Going forward, my friends. Amrle Mar Bar Amemar of Ashi. Abatsui Kamitsali Bey. My father, he would pray while holding the Dalaminim. Sounds familiar, right? Well, we just do for Hallel, but and Hoshanas as well. But he would seemingly daven. Sounds like Shmona Esrei as well while holding it. But seems to be contradicted by a brisa. Meisvei. Lo yeches adam tefillin biyado sefer Torah becheko v'yispalel. A person should not hold their tefillin or their tefillin in their hands or sefer Torah on their lap and daven. The idea behind it is, Rashi explains, is that mipnei shetarad hu b'mechashafto, you're going to be so concerned and preoccupied shel yiplu miyado v'ispazu, that you don't want the tefillin or the sefer Torah to fall out of your hands. You're going to focus your attention so much on the Torah or the tefillin that you're holding on to that you're not going to focus on your davening. So here, the concern is for your davening, not for the Torah. I mean, we care about the Torah and tefillin, but we're worried that you're going to care so much about them that you're not going to focus on your actual davening. But then there's some additional halachos which are for the dignity of the tefillin and the Torah. One should relieve themselves while holding them. Nor are you allowed to take a nap with them on, whether it be a full nap or whether it be just a small nap. Vamar Shmuel, Sakinu Kara Kikar Mos, all these different kind of things, whether it be a knife, a bowl, a loaf, or money, that you're afraid you're going to be focusing on not dropping them the entire time. Again, these two will distract you from davening. What's the point over here? The point here is it sounds like the only thing you should be holding in your hand while davening is your sitter, lest you be distracted. So how's it possible that it could be appropriate to hold the lulav while you are davening? So an interesting answer given. Hasam lav mitzvah ninhu. Those cases, holding a tefillin, holding a sefer Torah is not inherently a mitzvah. However, it's a mitzvah to wear tefillin. It's a mitzvah to learn from the Torah. Just to stam hold them is not a mitzvah. Utarbahu, and that's why you'll be preoccupied. Hacha mitzvah ninhu v'lotarbahu. But here, holding the lulav and esrog is a mitzvah, and therefore you won't be preoccupied by it. Rashi understands this to me. It's a little bit difficult to understand because you would think, okay, great, it's a mitzvah, but I mean, I don't know about you. I'm still like, oh gosh, it's like the esrog is like falling out of my hand over here. I'm holding a sitter. I'm holding the Hoshanis. So what? So Rashi says, Nitilasa likichasa mitzahi. The taking of the lulav is considered a mitzvah. We toch shechaviva mitzvah because the mitzvah is precious to him. Right? That's the topic over. We're talking about how precious the mitzvah is. Ein masa v'shimura kavel of lotarid. He's not going to feel preoccupied by holding it. He's not going to feel distracted. Now, I think one explanation given the Rishonim is it's not just simply that you're not preoccupied while holding the lulav and esrog, but the lulav and esrog are actually they're part of the tefillah process. Remember how we learned a few blot ago? What's the whole idea of the nanuim, of shaking it? So, we're supposed to be thinking about how God is in control of the entire world, no matter what direction we're waving it in. There's certain kavanos we're supposed to have, or thinking about, praying that there shouldn't be bad winds and rain, whichever explanation you want to go with. So it's not just simply that I'm not distracted by the lulav and esrog, but arguably it's actually part of the prayer service. Otherwise, I can make an argument that I get distracted when wearing my talis and tefillin while davening. I'm like always like, oh my gosh, is my tefillin like falling off the wrong end? Oh, I have to like readjust my talis so it doesn't fall off. So they're also, but it's part of the tefillah process. It's
Rabbi,
purpose.
Rabbi, don't we hold the Torah during certain tefillot specifically?
Yeah. I mean, we're actually going to get to that in a moment. That's the next section of the Gemara, but I think here it just means like you're holding it by happenstance. Like, oh, you were like moving things around, and like, oh, you start taking your tefillin off, and then you're holding tefillin and davening, but you're not actually using. Notice the lashon. The language here is with the sefer Torah becheko. So you're not actually using the Sefer
Uh,
at that point.
uh,
But actually,
mm,
the next section, next Bryce in the Gemara actually is closer to your scenario, which discusses Torah reading, Kriyas Torah. Tani, Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok Omer, Kachayim in Hagan shel Anshe Yerushalayim. This is what the Anshe Yerushalayim would do. Adam Yotzimi Besu Lulav Biyado. So start off the day, you leave your house while holding your lulav. Biyado. Holech the Beis HaKnesses Lulav Biyado. You go to shul while holding your lulav. Korei Kriya Shema Mitzvah Lulav Biyado. You daven Kriya Shema and general davening while holding the lulav. Korei Batorah Venosius Kapav. And when you are reading the Torah and you're duchening Manicha Agabe Karka, you can place it down. Holech levakir cholim, and when you go to visit the sick, uanachim avim, to pay a shiva kol, lulav biyado, you still are holding your lulav, but nichnas the beis hamedrash, when you get to the beis hamedrash to learn, mishager lulav biyad beno biyad avdo ubiyad shlucho. You'll send it back with your kid or with someone else. My Kamashmalan, what's the lesson here? Again, similar idea to before.
not to
Lo
distract you.
diacha kama hayuz reason mitzvos, just to show again how careful and how conscientious they were that they were taking the lulav wherever they went. Albeit when they got to the base medrash, they were distracted, but otherwise, I mean, like they don't want to be distracted by holding it. They want to focus on the learning. But right, that's what Rashi says. Tar b'shmaisa v'yipol miyadav. You're going to be again the same idea for davening. You don't want to be overly distracted. Interestingly, though, you do hold the lulav for davening, but for learning, you put it down. But again, this is not what everyone was doing. This was like the great men of Yerushalayim. That was their particular minhag. But the point I wanted to show you, Phyllis, is that we mentioned that when you're reading from the Torah, you place it down. Now, Rashi actually understands Korei Batorah, Tzarich la'aniach halulav lefisha golel sefer Torah poscho. Not that the reading inherently requires you to place the lulav down, but because you're going to be preoccupied with the rolling and the opening and the closing, that requires two hands. So that's when you place the lulav down.
But I'm talking about also the Torah itself, that we hold, we daven and we hold the Torah during
We don't hold
certain.
the Torah while we're davening, usually, right? Like usually someone temporarily
Uh,
holds it after Glila. Some shuls
uh,
where they don't have like the insert to put it in,
well,
someone will hold it until the end of the Haftorah or until
how
CAS takes it back.
how about Kol Nidre, for instance?
Yeah, interesting point. Is Kol Nidre a tefillah?
Um,
I don't know.
it's part of it. It's part
this
of
this
it.
is a whole different discussion, but I don't know if Kol Nidre you would necessarily classify as a typical tefillah. Yeah. It's a legalistic formula actually for the annulment of vows. It's a really funny. I mean, it's a funny thing in general when you actually look at the translation and you realize like there's all these like movies and things about how it's like such an emotional prayer, and then you actually look at it and it's like, oh, it's like all this legalistic formulations of how to get rid of vows. Now, some people, I think, post facto darshan it as, no, this idea of becoming cleansed and pure is, I mean, like that is the idea, of course, that you want to come in without baggage when you come into Yom Kippur, but I still kind of get a kick out of that. I guess it's right at the beginning of the service, so it resonates.
And
And
when you say Hallel on Sukkot, you hold the lulav and etrog.
you bet we do. You bet we do.
So we're combining the two,
So I
davening and.
think so. There we have that. We talk about this in the Gemara. It's a good question. We have the Nanuim also during Hallel. Well, the Hallel is interesting. Hallel, it's celebratory, right? Because the idea of bringing the Dalaminim has an agricultural connection. We're kind of celebrating the season by bringing the fruits and bringing the growth of the land. But also we have the Nanum during Hallel. We darshaned psukim
Mhm,
related to Hallel, Ana Shemoshiana, the
mhm.
Hodus, and there's a connection to the Nanuim, the waving. So I think that's why it's particularly during Hallel. But you are right. It's interesting how we have this brisa saying it's commendable to have it seemingly throughout much of davening. I guess you could do that, but maybe it's yuhara at this point. Maybe it's considered, a form of religious arrogance. I don't know about you. My hands are tired enough by the end of Hallowed Hoshanas. I'm not going to push for more. Anyway, let's get the last section of the Gemara in. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yontif Rishon. So if you remember, at the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi said that if you take the Arba Minim, so you could bring them to shul, so you could shake them there, because you, even though it was Shabbos, and you weren't supposed, you're not allowed to carry them to Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos. Nonetheless, since it was b'shogeg, it was inadvertent, it was unwitting, and it was for the purpose of a mitzvah, well, let it slide. You don't even have to bring a carbon to atone for it. Now, what's the idea behind this? Amar Abaye, lo shanu el shel yatzubo, al yatzubo chayiv. What's the implication? This assumes that you are on your way to perform a mitzvah. If you already took the lulav earlier, you're already yotzei the mitzvah. So this assumes that you weren't yet yotzei the mitzvah. You're on your way to go to shul to be yotzei the mitzvah. Oh, it's Shabbos. I just walked through Rosh Hashanah. We'll let you off the hook because you're on your way to perform a mitzvah. Here's the issue. Ha mid'agve nafik be. But wait a minute. We know that the mitzvah of lulav, and it's, stripping down all the different, taking away the nanuim, taking away all the fancy bells and whistles. The mitzvah of lulav is fulfilled at what moment?
And shake it.
Not shaking. When you pick it up.
Hmm.
That's why, by the way, we flip the esrog upside down when we make the bracha, and then we flip it over afterwards. So we're not yet yotze when we pick it up. We make the bracha, so it's over la'asiyasan. So that's what Abaye actually says. Amar Abaye, this case presupposes kishahabchu, that you had one or all of the dalaminim were upside down, so he hadn't yet been yotze. Rava Amar, afilu tima shel havchu, even if the case is not that he's carrying him upside down, maybe he just wasn't carrying them in his hand. He put them in a case, right? You have those fancy lulav cases that you can get, or non-fancy ones like I have. So you're not yotze if you're not holding it directly. But isn't Rava of the opinion? Apparently, this was on Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph, so I have to do Chazara to remember that myself. But isn't Rava of the opinion that carrying the dalaminim, even indirectly, would still be considered lakicha? That'd be considered taking the lulav for mitzvah purposes. So the answer is hani mini derek kavod. That's when you're carrying it in a respectable manner. Al derek bizayin lo, but if you're not carrying it in a respectable manner, then you're not yotze. So two possibilities: either you're carrying it upside down, or you're carrying it in not the most respectable fashion via something else indirectly. So then you're not yet yotze. But again, interesting halacha l'maisa tie-in over there. Now, one last thing I want to point out before we conclude is Tosos. You look at Tosos right here, and Bezim and Aleph on the top. Amar Bai kishahavchu. So the Tosos points out here, miditzterich l'shnui hachi mashma desfira le de mitzvahs einan tzrichas kavana. We could infer from here that Abaye holds that mitzvahs einan tzrichas kavana. There's a huge machlokes in general about whether, in order to fulfill a positive mitzvah, you have to have kavana when you're doing it. And in fact, you'll see sometimes it was very much popularized for mystical purposes in Hasidic circles, right? They'll have the hineni, muchan, and mazuman, right? This whole idea. Now, taking away the mystical parts, it's a nice thing to focus. In fact, according to some opinions, if you don't have kavana to be yotze when performing the mitzvah, you may have not been yotze the mitzvah. So Abai here is assuming that mitzvahs ain't on srichas kavana. Otherwise, why did Abai have to give the answer in the Gemara that you're walking while it's upside down, and that's why you're not yet yotze? He could have just easily said he didn't want to be yotze yet until he got to shul. Apparently, you're yotze whether you like it or not. If you pick it up, even if you're not planning to be yotze, you're automatically yotze. It doesn't require kavana.
But you have to make a bracha first.
You should. Ideally, you should. But you are yotze midoraisa. The bracha is only midorabanan. You'd already be yotze midoraisa at that point. But the issue is, Tosos points out, right? Takai ambotzi or shusarabim v'hasam ain't shaykh miskam. Let's called kamigol berech. Vodari Baholi Chitzel Bakila. Okay, fine. Fatema, the Besov Ru based in. So Maseches Rosh Hashanah. The Amar Rava Mitzvahs Ina Tzrichas Kavana, Kamosi Le Abai Tuva. So Abai is the one who is busy picking a fight with Rava over Rava is the one who espouses the view that mitzvah of mitzvahs Ina Tzrichas Kavana. So, maybe Shema Abai Kabli Mine. So the question, so maybe Abai ultimately accepted it in the end of the day. Right. Okay, wonderful. So anyway, that's an interesting point that Tosis makes over there. Anyway, any questions, my friends? All right. Well, it's wonderful learning with you. I guess is it too early for me to wish you a good Shabbos? We are away Thursday through Tuesday. So again, next week, we will have it back on Thursday, God willing. That's the plan. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have
Have
a
a
good
wonderful
one.
week, everybody. Shkoyach. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
making the
You
time to
too.
learn.
Bye.